this series of videos, we present the available stitch types and their properties. In this video, we will present the Satin serial outline type. Satin serial is an outline type that can be used to give a satin look to any line design. Satin serial looks very much like satin stitches, but with constant width. Its main advantage is that it is much easier to edit, just like editing any line. It is often used to outline applique shapes or create uniform borders. You can easily set any digitized part to satin serial simply by selecting the part and selecting the satin serial type. Alternatively, you may select satin serial first and then digitize the part you like. Satin serial is a kind of zigzag stitches added on top of the outline. Let's see how you can customize satin serial using the available properties. First of all, you can make it wider or thinner just by increasing or decreasing the outline width. You can also offset the satin line to be outside or inside the shape. For example, you may add 1 mm offset in case you have an object with 2 mini stitches before the satin serial in order to avoid shrinking caused by this object. Or you may add 3 mm to have a space in between the object and the satin serial. Negative values offset the satin serial to the opposite direction. Patterns are really not necessary for satin serial unless you have a really wide satin bar. By applying a pattern, you can create extra wide satin bars with a decorative pattern. This is not the usual satin bar. There are also other stitches inside the satin bar which allow you to create a very wide satin bar. The patterns area contains all the patterns that can be applied to the design. Select the pattern you prefer by clicking on it. Satin lines remain the same, and the only change is that the needle penetration points are placed in a way to create a pattern for the fill. When a pattern is applied, there are the additional options, pattern type and length. Pattern type controls how the pattern repeats along the satin bars. Seating is defined by the length value. The pattern is repeated as many times as possible, keeping the spacing consistent according to the length you set. Adjust the length and the pattern adapts accordingly. There is a minimum length value, in that case it is 2 mm, so reducing the length may not change the result visually. Fit 1 to 9 defines how many times the pattern will be repeated on the satin fill. Density, compensation, and underlay depend on your chosen fabric. If you change fabric, the parameters will adjust automatically. Density controls how close the stitches are placed. Lower density values means that the stitches are closer together, providing tighter stitches and fuller coverage. Higher density values offer lighter coverage, preventing puckering, better for delicate or stretchy fabrics. Compensation corrects the fabric distortion during the embroidery process to preserve accurate shapes. The value you enter changes the width of the satin bar that will be embroidered. We call underlay the supporting stitches placed beneath the satin bar that stabilize the fabric, creating a base layer for the optimum embroidery quality. The software automatically selects the appropriate underlay for your project. You can also set an underlay manually. Click on the list to see the available underlay patterns you can choose from. You also notice special underlay types called 3D 1 to 5, which create raised dimensional embroidery. My favorite ones are 3D 2 and 3D 3, which produce excellent results. The random property creates irregular, jagged edges along your satin lines, useful when aiming for textures that resemble fur or grass. By defining a percentage value between 0% and 90%, you're telling the software how much variance to allow in the stitch length relative to the drawn shape outline. The higher the percentage you choose, the deeper the random spikes will be. An additional option, Random Side, lets you control where the effect appears. Choosing side A, the random length variations will only appear on one specific side of the object, leaving the other side perfectly smooth. Choosing side B, the random length variations will only appear on the opposite side of the object. Symmetric, where stitch length remains the same, but the stitch is shifted randomly to both sides. And finally, both, where the random stitches go to both sides, the stitch length and the direction of movement is random. Half-pitch compensation helps maintain quality in small satin objects. The program begins with placing stitches after a distance equal to half the thickness of the thread. When the Add Short Long option is active, the software shortens stitches in wide sections to avoid excessive stitching in narrow parts. This doesn't significantly change the total stitch count, it just replaces longer stitches with shorter ones for smoother results. When there is a change in the direction of the satin bar, enabling the corners option, the software generates sharper and defined corners depending on the shape of the outlines. Handmade corners can be turned on or off. This is a new way of cornering that you can apply in your designs to get a different look and feel. The option Generate As controls the style in which your stitches are generated. Satin alternates a stitch parallel to the direction and a sloped one, meeting at the same point. Zigzag is similar, but both stitches are slanted in opposite directions. Split long stitches divide any satin stitch longer than 6.5 mm to prevent sagging or snagging. A saddle secure needle penetration point is inserted right in the middle. The software slightly randomizes the split point for a natural, uninterrupted satin look. Finally, using the fixing and locking options, you can adjust the way securing stitches are added. By default, Auto is applied and the software intelligently decides whether fixing stitches are technically necessary based on the object type, stitch density, and overall sequence. If you choose Never, then no fixing stitches will be added, forcing a soft start. If you choose Always, then fixing stitches will inevitably be added at the start of the object. Likewise, you can adjust locking stitches as needed. Thanks for watching.